The gravitational anomaly appeared at 03:17 station time, and Valith Saruman felt it before the instruments caught it. A wrongness in the floor, a tremor that moved through the bones of the observatory like a whispered apology from physics itself. She pressed both palms flat against the console and held still. The Sarathi did not startle easily. 4,000 years of careful observation had bred patience into their culture the way other civilizations bred warriors or merchants. They were listeners, watchers. They built their stations on dead moons at the edges of mapped space, and they sat in the dark and waited for signals that never came. Valith had done this for 200 years. The silence had become her profession. But the tremor was not in the station. It was in space. "Primary array is spiking," said Doron from across the monitoring bay, his voice carrying the particular flatness the Sarathi used when they were afraid. "Gravitational flux at bearing 271, relative. Magnitude. I cannot read the magnitude. The scale is cycling." Valith crossed the bay in 4 strides. She was tall even by Sarathi standards, her pale gray skin catching the blue console light, her 4-fingered hands already pulling data streams apart on the display. The Sarathi Deepwatch Observatory sat at the edge of mapped space, a listening post built into the crust of a dead moon orbiting a brown dwarf. It existed for one purpose: to hear the silence and report anything that broke it. Something had broken it. "Show me the waveform," she said. Doron complied. The gravitational signature filled the main display. Not a pulse, not a wave, not any shape their models recognized. It was structured, layered. The oscillation pattern repeated every 11 seconds with variations so precise they could not be natural. "That is not stellar," Valith said. "No. That is not geological. No." She stared at the waveform and felt the first cold thread of something she had not experienced in 200 years of academic work. The Sarathi language had a word for it: vain-occur the sensation of standing at the edge of knowledge and feeling the edge move. "Wake the station commander, wake the council liaison, wake everyone." She paused and her voice hardened. "And begin recording. Everything from this moment forward goes into the contact archive." The contact archive had never been used. In 4,000 years of Sarathi observation, across 11 Deepwatch stations scattered along the frontier, not a single entry had ever been logged. The archive was ceremonial, a concession to theoretical possibility that every generation of Sarathi astronomers maintained and quietly believed would remain empty forever. Doron's hands trembled as he keyed the activation sequence. "Valith, the anomaly, it is moving." She looked at the display. The gravitational signature was drifting not toward them, not away, but laterally, as if something massive was adjusting its position in space with the casual ease of a person shifting weight from one foot to the other. The energy required to produce that kind of gravitational manipulation was beyond anything the Sarathi had modeled, beyond anything the conquered of 31 species had theorized. The best gravitational engines in the Conquered's fleet could nudge an asteroid. Whatever was out there was bending spacetime like fabric. "How large?" she asked. "Inferring mass from gravitational distortion." Doron's voice cracked. He ran the calculation, frowned, ran it again with different parameters, then a third time with the raw data. The answer did not change. "Valith, the source mass is equivalent to a small moon, but the gravimetric shadow is contained. Whatever is producing this is holding its own weight inside a controlled field." "A ship." "Something the mass of a small moon, holding its own gravity on a leash." Valith's training took over. She was the station's xenolinguist, one of only 11 in the Sarathi civilization, specialists in the theoretical frameworks of interspecies communication. She had spent her career preparing for a moment that every mentor, every colleague, every review board had assured her would never come. The galaxy was mapped. The 31 species of the Conquered had found each other across 2 millennia of slow expansion and settled into careful, distant coexistence. Every debris field had been catalogued. Every anomalous signal had been chased down and explained. The idea that something had been missed, something this large, this powerful, was supposed to be impossible. She opened the contact protocol file. It had been written 3,000 years ago by a committee that had debated every line for a decade. The formatting was archaic, the language formal. Step 1. Establish that the signal is intentional. The gravitational waveform repeated its 11-second cycle, structured, layered, intentional. Step 1 was already done. Step 2. Determine directionality. Is the signal aimed at you? Doron, can you determine if the anomaly's output is directional or omnidirectional? He ran the calculation twice before answering, each time adjusting the antenna array's focus to eliminate uncertainty. Directional. The gravitational wavefront has a focal cone approximately 9 degrees wide. He checked the bearing, checked it again. His hand stopped moving. We are at the center of the cone. It was looking at them. Whatever was out there, moon mass, gravity bending, impossibly advanced, was pointing directly at a listening post that most of the conquered had forgotten existed. Valith felt her pulse in her throat. The Sarathi had 2 hearts and both of them were hammering. She forced her voice level. Station Commander Uthan, report to the monitoring bay immediately. Uthan arrived within minutes, still pulling on his duty coat, his silver hair uncombed, his eyes carrying the fog of interrupted sleep. He was old even by Sarathi standards, over 300, and had spent the last century in the belief that the deep watch posts were honorable retirement, not active stations. He had told Valith on her first day aboard that the greatest excitement she could expect was a rogue comet or a malfunctioning sensor array. He looked at the main display, and Valith watched his face change the way stone changes under water, slowly, completely, irreversibly. How long? He asked. 18 minutes since first detection. Has it communicated? The gravitational anomaly is the communication. It is structured, repeating, and aimed directly at this station. Uthan absorbed this. Then he did something Valith had not expected. He sat down, not in defeat, in discipline. He sat, placed his hands on his knees, and spoke with the measured calm of a man who understood that the next hours would define the rest of Sarathi history, and that panic would serve none of it. You are the xenolinguist, he said. This is your authority now. What do you need? Full array access, a direct uplink to the Concord's linguistic archives, and permission to transmit. That last word landed like a stone in still water. Transmit. To answer. To tell whatever was out there that someone had heard, that someone was here, that the silence had been broken on both ends. Granted, Uthan said, all of it. Valith turned back to the console and opened a channel she had only ever used in simulation. The contact response array, a suite of instruments designed to produce gravitational pulses on a scale the Sarathi could manage. It was primitive compared to what was reaching them. Their transmitter could produce a pulse equivalent to a large asteroid's gravitational signature. Whatever was out there was producing forces equivalent to a moon. The difference in scale was like answering a thunderclap with a whisper. She did not hesitate. She keyed in the most basic possible response, a single pulse matched in duration to the incoming signal's base frequency. One pulse. I am here, I hear you. The observatory went silent. 15 people stood or sat at their stations, not breathing. The air recyclers hummed. The brown dwarf's dim light seeped through the observation ports. 14 seconds passed. The anomaly's 11-second cycle paused. Valith felt the floor shift again, not a tremor this time, but a settling, as if the dead moon itself had exhaled. On the display, the gravitational waveform changed. The repeating pattern broke apart, reorganized, and in its place came something new, a sequence. Short, long, short, 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 long, 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 short, short. It is responding, Doron whispered. Valith was already recording, already analyzing. The sequence was not random. It was counting. Based to arithmetic expressed in gravitational pulse durations. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. A Fibonacci progression. The one mathematical sequence that required no shared culture, no shared biology, no shared history to recognize. It was a fingerprint pressed into the language of the universe itself. Mathematics, the universal handshake. "It is intelligent," she said, and the word felt absurd even as she spoke it. Of course it was intelligent. Something that could hold a moon's worth of mass in a controlled gravitational field and aim it like a spotlight was not a geological curiosity, but saying it out loud made it real, made it protocol, made it the first entry in a contact archive that had waited 3,000 years for ink. She keyed her response, the next three numbers in the sequence, 21, 34, 55, sent as gravitational pulses, crude and small against the source's ocean of force. The response came in 7 seconds. The source completed the sequence to the next 5 values, then paused, then sent something entirely different. A complex harmonic, multiple gravitational frequencies layered simultaneously, producing an interference pattern that Valith's instrument struggled to parse. She ran it through 3 different analysis frameworks before the third one caught it. The interference pattern translated into a 3-dimensional shape. A sphere. Then the sphere deformed, elongated, became an ellipse. Then the ellipse sprouted protrusion structures, geometries that followed engineering logic, not natural formation. The gravitational sculpture was building a picture, a 3-dimensional, rotating model of something real. "It is showing us its shape," Valith said. Her voice was barely audible. "It is showing us what it looks like." The model resolved over 90 seconds of increasingly fine detail. The object producing the anomaly was not a moon. It was a vessel, elongated, asymmetric, covered in structures that her instruments read as energy collectors, communication arrays, and drive assemblies of no recognizable design. The gravitational model showed it in extraordinary detail. Hull sections with visible seams and repair patches, viewport clusters arranged in non-standard configurations, docking bays large enough to hold conquered frigates, and scale markers. Whoever was sending this wanted the Sarathi to understand exactly how large it was. 7 kilometers, bow to stern, 7 kilometers of ship. The number sat on the display like an accusation. The largest vessel in the conquered fleet, the Sarathi dreadnought Unwavering Vigil, was 2 kilometers long and had taken 40 years to build. 7 kilometers was not a ship. It was a city that moved. Uthan stood up from his chair. "Valith, can you determine species of origin?" "No, this vessel matches nothing in the conquered database, nothing in the theoretical archive, nothing in the relic surveys from the outer reaches or the dead civilization catalogs from the expansion period." She paused, because the next word had weight she wasn't sure she could carry. "This is new." New, in a galaxy where the 31 known species had catalogued every ruin, every debris field, every anomalous signal across 4,000 years of cooperative exploration. New. "They are requesting something," Doron said. He was watching a secondary display where the gravitational signals were being parsed by the station's linguistic AI. The pattern after the vessel model, it is a query structure, a rising harmonic followed by a pause. They showed us their shape, and now they are asking for ours. Valith understood immediately. The handshake protocol, not the Saratha's ancient, dusty, never-used version written by a committee that had expected it to remain theoretical, but the real thing happening in real time. The unknown vessel had introduced itself. Name, shape, scale. Now it was waiting for a reciprocal introduction. She pulled up the station's structural files and began encoding a gravitational model of the Deepwatch Observatory. It took her 11 minutes of painstaking work, calibrating pulse frequencies and interference patterns to build something recognizable from the crude tools she had. Her transmitter was weak, the resolution poor compared to what the source was producing, but she built it faithfully: the station's disk shape, the antenna arrays, the docking rings, the habitat modules, the observation gallery. She added a scale marker. 400 meters. The station was 400 meters across. The vessel out there was 7 kilometers long, 17 times the station's diameter. She transmitted the model and waited. The response came in 4 seconds. The source sent back her model, corrected it had filled in structural details she had been unable to resolve with her primitive transmitter, details it could apparently see from its position. The habitat module's internal divisions, the exact number of antenna spars on the primary array, the stress fractures in the station's lower hull that maintenance had been scheduling for repair. It had seen through their hull. From its position in open space, it had looked at their station the way a doctor looks at an X-ray: casually, completely, without obstruction. Then it sent something that made Valith sit back in her chair. The source transmitted a model of a Sarathi, a single individual standing upright, with accurate proportions: the elongated torso, the four-fingered hands, the dual-lobed cranial structure, the faint pattern of dermal ridges along the forearms that was unique to Valith's particular regional subtype. It had not just observed them, it had observed her specifically. Through the station's hull, through rock, through whatever shielding the observatory possessed, it had looked at them and built an accurate model of what they were. "It can see us," Valith said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. "Through the station, through the moon's crust, it has resolved our biology, individual biology." The monitoring bay went very quiet. Someone at the far console, Valith, did not see who made a sound that might have been a prayer. Othen spoke first. "Is that a threat?" Valith considered the question with every year of training she possessed. The capacity to see through solid rock was terrifying. Any military mind in the Conquered would read it as a targeting capability. Scan through armor, identify crew, eliminate them individually. But the source had not simply scanned them. It had shown them the scan. It had taken its capabilities and laid them bare, openly, voluntarily. The choice to show what it saw, to be transparent about its own power, was something else entirely. "No," she said, "it is an act of honesty. It is saying, I can see you. I want you to know that I can see you. There are no secrets on my side of this conversation." Doron raised a hand. His fingers were trembling. "Valith, there is additional data in the model they returned. The structural corrections to our station, they were not just observational. They included recommended repair prioritization. The stress fractures in the lower hull, the microfracture developing in antenna spar 7, the seal degradation on docking ring 2. They ranked them by failure probability and time horizon." Silence in the bay. "They diagnosed our station," Othen said slowly. "And provided a maintenance schedule," Doron added. His voice had gone past fear into something that sounded almost like bewilderment. "The repair timeline they suggest is more accurate than the one our own engineering department produced last month." The source was still waiting. The query pattern repeated, gentle, patient, the same rising harmonic followed by a pause. It had shown its vessel. It had shown that it could see them. Now it was asking for something more. "It wants to see a Sarathi," Doron said. "Not a model, not a schematic, a person." "It wants us to show ourselves willingly," Valith corrected. "It already knows what we look like. It is asking if we are willing to confirm it, to participate, to say, yes, this is what I am and I am not hiding." The distinction mattered. Demand versus invitation. Surveillance versus acknowledgement. The difference between a predator cataloging prey and a stranger extending a hand. Valith stood up. She walked to the observation gallery, a reinforced viewport cut into the station's upper surface, facing the direction of the anomaly. Outside there was nothing visible. The brown dwarf cast a dim rust-colored light across the dead moon's surface. The stars were faint and uncaring. If something 7 kilometers long was out there, it was invisible to the naked eye at this distance. But she knew it was watching. She stood in the viewport. She pressed her palm flat against the transparent composite and held still. Not a gesture from the contact protocol. Not a calculated response. An instinct older than language, older than civilization, the impulse to reach toward the thing that reaches toward you. The gravitational signal changed. A single, sustained tone, lower than anything the source had produced before, held for a full 30 seconds. In the xenolinguistic frameworks Valeth had studied across her entire career, sustained tones in initial contact were universally parsed as acknowledgement. I see you. Thank you. You are real to me now. She returned to the console. Her hands had stopped shaking. We need to tell the conquered. Othen nodded. The courier drone is prepped. What do we send? Valeth composed the message in formal Sarathi, stripped of interpretation, stripped of emotion, pure data. Gravitational anomaly detected. Source: vessel, 7 kilometers, unknown origin, no match in conquered records. Communication established via gravitational modulation. Intelligence confirmed. Intent appears non-hostile. Source demonstrates capacity for real-time gravitational manipulation and hull-penetrating imaging exceeding all known technology by orders of magnitude. Requesting conquered advisory, maintaining contact. The drone launched into the dark. Transit time to the nearest conquered relay, 18 hours. In those 18 hours, Valeth did not sleep. She could not. The source continued transmitting, and every transmission was a gift, a piece of a language being built in real time, from nothing, between two minds that shared no biology, no history, no frame of reference except the laws of physics and the mutual conviction that the other was worth talking to. The source taught her its counting system, base 12. It taught her its method of indicating questions versus statements, a harmonic shift in the gravitational carrier wave that reminded Valeth of the tonal inflections in the conquered's oldest languages. It taught her spatial prepositions by moving small gravitational markers around her model of the station. Here, there, above, below, inside, outside, near, far. The concepts came fast and clean, each one verified before the next was introduced. And Valeth taught it Sarathi. She transmitted linguistic data, audio recordings of Sarathi speech, matched with gravitational models of the objects being named. Star, moon, station, person, hand, eye, rock, light, dark. She built a vocabulary the way a mason builds a wall, one stone at a time, testing each for stability before placing the next. By hour 4, the source was forming 2-word combinations. Vessel plus here, person plus station. Each combination triggered a verification exchange. The source would send its understanding back in a modified gravitational pattern, and Valeth would confirm or correct. The error rate dropped with every cycle. Whatever intelligence was on the other end of that signal, it learned the way deep water moves, relentlessly, patiently, and all at once. At hour 4 and 20 minutes, the source made a mistake. It sent a combination that did not parse station plus below plus dark, and Valeth corrected it, showing that the Sarathi preposition for below required a referent. The source acknowledged the correction. Then it did something that made Valeth set down her stylus and stare. It went back through every previous exchange where it had used a spatial preposition and retransmitted each one with the corrected grammar. 47 corrections, delivered in sequence, each one demonstrating that it had not merely memorized the rule, but retroactively applied it to its entire acquired vocabulary. The process took 90 seconds. No Sarathi student of language could have done it in 90 minutes. At hour 5, something happened that nearly ended the contact. Daron was monitoring the station's environmental systems when an alarm triggered a pressure fluctuation in the habitat module's outer shell. the kind of microvariation that usually indicated thermal expansion from the brown dwarf's radiation cycle. Routine, ignorable, but the station's automated response was not routine. The defense grid activated. A burst of low-power radar swept outward, standard proximity scan, harmless to anything more complex than a meteoroid. The radar pulse hit the anomaly. The gravitational signal stopped. Total silence. No waveform, no harmonics, no query patterns. The display went flat. Valeth's console showed nothing but the brown dwarf's background radiation and the dead moon's faint geological hum. "What happened?" she said, and she heard her own voice crack. "The defense grid pinged them," Doron said, his face the color of old chalk. "Automated proximity scan. I did not trigger it. The habitat module's thermal variance triggered it." Valeth's hands moved before her mind caught up. She killed the defense grid manually, overriding the station's automated systems with her command authority. Then she transmitted a rapid-fire sequence using the gravitational vocabulary they had built: no plus threat plus station plus error plus speak plus continue plus please, and added something that was not in any protocol handbook. She transmitted the gravitational model of the radar system, showed it activating, showed the thermal trigger, showed herself deactivating it. A narrative, an explanation, an apology delivered in the grammar of physics. 11 seconds of silence. Doron was not breathing. Uthan had risen from his chair. The technician monitoring passive sensors said nothing because there was nothing to report. The anomaly had not moved. It was still there, still holding its moon mass in a controlled field, still 7 kilometers of impossible engineering pointed at a listening post on a dead moon. But it was quiet. Then the gravitational signal resumed. Not at full strength tentatively, the carrier waved lower in amplitude, as though the source were speaking more softly than before. It sent a single compound concept that Valeth's parsing framework translated as understand plus accident plus continue. And then it sent something else. A gravitational model of the radar system, not Valeth's crude version, but a far more detailed one, rendered with the source's vastly superior imaging capability. It showed the thermal trigger mechanism. It showed the radar pulse's trajectory. And it showed, precisely and without commentary, the point at which the pulse had intersected the source vessel's hull. It was showing her what the radar had touched, a section of hull plating near what appeared to be a sensor array. The model highlighted microscopic stress patterns in the plating, not damage, but age. Fatigue lines, repair welds laid over older repair welds. The hull section had been patched and repatched across what must have been centuries of travel. The source was showing Valeth its scars. She understood. The momentary silence had not been anger or threat assessment. It had been surprise, the reflex of a being that had been in the dark for a very long time, whose skin had been touched unexpectedly. The return was not forgiveness, because there was nothing to forgive. It was the choice to remain open despite the flinch. Valeth's professional composure held. Barely. She logged the incident, noted the automated system's trigger parameters, and filed a request to disable all active scanning while contact was in progress. Then she resumed the language exchange, and the source met her halfway, amplitude rising back to its previous level within minutes. By hour 6, simple sentences: vessel plus here plus wait, person plus station plus speak plus yes, many plus star plus between plus travel. The grammar was rough, the vocabulary limited, but the intent was unmistakable. It was not reciting, it was thinking in her language. Doron brought her water at hour 7. She drank without taking her eyes from the display. Her console had become a mosaic of overlapping data streams, gravitational waveforms, linguistic parse trees, spectral analysis of the carrier signal, timestamp logs running to the second. Around her, the monitoring bay had transformed. Every technician had been pressed into service. 2 ran backup recording banks. 3 monitored the integrity of the transmission channel. One did nothing but watch the anomaly's position on passive sensors, reporting every 7 minutes that it had not moved. It never moved. At hour 7, the source introduced a concept that had no equivalent in the contact protocol frameworks. It sent a complex harmonic pattern that Valith could not parse using any existing model. She ran it through spectral analysis, linguistic decomposition, mathematical regression. Nothing fit. The pattern repeated 3 times, each time with slight variations, as though the source were trying different approaches to express the same idea. On the 4th repetition, Valith stopped analyzing and started listening. The pattern was not a word. It was not a number. It was not a spatial concept or a temporal marker. It was a sequence of gravitational pulses that rose in complexity, reached a peak of almost musical intricacy, and then resolved into simplicity. A movement. A journey from noise to clarity. It is trying to express something abstract, she told Doron. Something outside our established vocabulary. Can you ask what it means? She did. She sent the query pattern followed by the source's own harmonic. The response was immediate. The source retransmitted the harmonic, then followed it with their established vocabulary vessel plus travel plus long plus dark plus, then plus station plus speak plus light. The vessel traveled long in darkness. Then the station spoke, and there was light. Valith sat very still. The source was not describing a physical event. It was describing an emotion. The harmonic pattern was not a word, it was the shape of loneliness ending. At hour 8, the source began using conditional structures: if plus speak plus continue plus then plus understand plus grow. The linguistic leap was enormous. Conditionals required temporal abstraction, causal reasoning, the ability to model hypothetical states. Whatever this species was, it did not merely communicate. It reasoned about the nature of communication while communicating. Valith felt a sensation she had no professional framework for. The closest word in Sarathi was ashun, the quiet trembling at the base of the skull that the ancients attributed to being seen by something divine. She was a scientist. She did not believe in divinity. But at hour 8, with a stranger's grammar assembling itself in real time from the raw material of gravitational force, the word came unbidden, and she did not reject it. Then it sent a sentence that stopped her cold. Vessel plus inside plus persons many, persons plus speak plus want. There were people inside the vessel, and they wanted to talk. Othen, her voice carried across the monitoring bay with an edge she couldn't mask. The vessel is crude. They are requesting direct communication. The station commander stood at the main display, reading the parsed transmission. His face had aged 10 years in 8 hours. The lines around his mouth had deepened. His hands, folded behind his back, were clenched white. Direct communication. Meaning what? Meaning they want to move beyond gravitational modeling. They want to speak. Audio, visual, possibly in person. In person. Othen repeated the phrase as though it were in a language he didn't understand. They have been patient, Valith said. Extraordinarily patient. They could have approached at any time. They clearly have the propulsion to close the distance in seconds. They could have scanned us without revealing that they were scanning. Instead, they announced themselves from a distance. They introduced their vessel. They asked before looking. They built a shared language from zero, one concept at a time, for 8 hours. She met his eyes. Everything they have done has been an invitation, not a demand. And if the invitation is a trap, then we are already inside it. They can see through our hull. They can read individual biosignatures. If hostility were the intent, we would not be having this conversation. We would have been a footnote in someone else's contact log. Othen held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. Open a visual channel. Standard first contact imaging suite. I want every sensor recording, every backup running, every data buffer writing to redundant storage. If we die in the next hour, I want the record to survive us. Valith activated the contact imaging array, a system that had been tested once a decade and never used for its intended purpose. Cameras, microphones, holographic projectors, all calibrated for a moment that 3,000 years of engineers had assumed would never arrive. She encoded a transmission, station plus speak plus C plus ready. The response was immediate. The gravitational modeling ceased, replaced by something raw and startling, an electromagnetic transmission on a frequency the station could receive without adaptation. A visual feed. The main display flickered, static, then it resolved. The monitoring bay went silent. Not the silence of discipline or protocol, not the silence of training. The silence of 15 Sarathi confronting something their civilization had not prepared them for, something that no amount of theoretical framework could have armored them against. The image showed the interior of the vessel, a space vast enough to dwarf the Deepwatch station's largest gallery. The ceiling was 60 meters high at minimum, curved, metallic, covered in conduit and panel work that spoke of engineering so advanced it looked almost organic in its complexity. The lighting was warm, amber gold, the kind of light that spoke of habitation rather than sterility. And standing in the center of the frame, looking directly into whatever camera was transmitting, was a being. Bipedal, bilateral symmetry. 2 arms, 2 legs, a single head with forward-facing eyes, predator placement, Valith noted, the part of her brain that was still functioning, professionally cataloging even as the rest of her ceased. Skin in shades of brown, hair dark and short. It wore a uniform dark fabric, fitted, with insignia on the chest and shoulders that suggested military or exploratory rank. Its posture was straight but not rigid. Its hands were visible, empty, at its sides. Its expression, and Valith found she could read it, which terrified her more than anything the gravitational data had produced, was careful, controlled, aware that it was being seen for the first time and aware that the seeing mattered. It was alone, one individual standing in that vast space with no weapon visible, no guard, no armor, no retinue. It had chosen to present itself as a single person. Open, unarmed, vulnerable by choice. Valith's training screamed at her from a dozen directions, cataloged the morphology, analyzed the uniform's material composition, assessed the environment for technological indicators, but she couldn't move. She was locked on the being's eyes. They were dark, steady, and they held something she recognized across every barrier of biology and evolution and 4,000 years of cosmic loneliness. They held the same fear she felt, and the same refusal to let fear dictate the moment. The being raised one hand, palm outward, fingers spread. Then it spoke. The sound came through the station's audio system, a voice, deep and clear, speaking a language that Valith's linguistic AI immediately began parsing, phonemes and pitch patterns cascading across her secondary display. But the being did not wait for translation. It repeated the gesture, palm out, fingers spread, and then pressed the palm against its own chest. Then extended it again toward the camera. I am here, I see you, I come open. Valith understood the gesture before the AI finished its phonetic analysis. She stood, walked to the holographic projector's field and raised her own hand. 4 fingers spread, palm outward. She pressed it to her chest, then extended it. On the display, the being's face changed. The careful control cracked, just slightly a shift in the muscles around the eyes, a softening of the jaw, and what came through the crack was something Valith would spend the rest of her career trying to describe in academic papers and never fully capture. Relief, gratitude, the particular joy of being understood for the first time. It spoke again. This time the AI had enough data to render a crude translation, displayed in Sarathi text across the bottom of the screen. We have traveled far, we have been looking. We did not know if anyone would answer. Valith transmitted her response using the gravitational linguistic bridge they had built over the last 8 hours, the AI simultaneously encoding it in the being's own language for the return audio feed. "You found us," we answer. The being nodded a dip of the head that translated universally. Acknowledgement. Then it stepped aside, deliberately. It moved to the left of the frame, and behind it, visible through a vast viewport in the vessel's hull, a sheet of transparent material 40 meters wide. Valith saw what she had been too focused to notice before. More ships. Not one vessel, not 7 kilometers of ship. The vessel they had been communicating with was the forward element, the scout, the emissary, the one that knocked on the door. Behind it, arranged in a formation that extended beyond the viewport's frame and kept going into the dark, were more. Dozens. Some larger than the first, their hull profiles different, heavier, broader, bristling with structures that could have been habitation blocks or energy arrays or things that had no conquered equivalent. Some smaller, sleek, moving in escort patterns around the larger vessels, all bearing the same hull aesthetic: dark metal, amber-lit viewports, the heavy industrial geometry of machines built for distances that made interstellar travel look provincial. The fleet had been there the entire time, waiting in the dark while the lead vessel established communication, waiting while Valith and the stranger built a language from nothing, holding position, engines dark, weapons cold, utterly silent, while 2 individuals exchanged palm presses through a camera feed. "How many?" Valith asked. Her voice was a whisper. Doran's instruments gave the answer in a cascade of sensor data that filled his display edge to edge. 47 distinct gravitational signatures. Vessel classes range from approximately 2 kilometers to... He rechecked the number. Then he rechecked it again, switching to a different sensor array, then a third. The number did not change. "Valith, the largest is 90 kilometers. 90 kilometers. A vessel the length of a mountain range. And it had been sitting silent, dark, invisible, while the 7-kilometer scout asked politely if anyone was home. The being on the screen watched Valith's reaction. It seemed to understand what she was seeing, what she was processing, the scale of recalibration happening behind her eyes. It spoke again, and this time the translation came faster. "We know this is difficult. We brought many because we have traveled a great distance and could not return. We brought them because they wanted to be here for this moment. They are not a threat. They are witnesses." Witnesses. A fleet of 47 vessels, the smallest larger than anything the Conquered had ever built, and they had come to watch their scout say hello. Uthan appeared at Valith's shoulder. His face was the color of ash. "What do they want?" Valith relayed the question. The being considered its response. Then it spoke slowly, and the translation assembled word by word on the display, each one landing with the weight of something that had been waiting a very long time to be said. "We are explorers. We left our home a long time ago. We have crossed distances that have no name in your language yet. We found others along the way. Some were afraid. Some were not ready. We left them in peace and moved on. We have been looking for someone who would answer, who would stand in the window and press their hand to the glass." The being pressed its palm to the viewport glass. Its hand was flat, fingers spread, the same gesture as the first. Behind it, the fleet waited in the dark, 90 kilometers of flagship holding its breath. "You did." Valith sat down, not in defeat, not in collapse. She sat because her legs would no longer hold her, because the magnitude of what she was witnessing exceeded her body's capacity to process it standing up. "Valith," Doran's voice was thick. "The Conquered relay has received our drone. Response incoming. Priority traffic military advisory channel." The Conquered's response arrived as a compressed data burst. Valith read it while the human waited on the screen, patient, unmoving, its palm still pressed to the glass. The message was from the Conquered Strategic Directorate. It contained 3 directives. First, cease all communication immediately. Second, evacuate the observatory. Third, a conquered defensive flotilla was being dispatched to the Anomaly's location. Estimated arrival, 40 hours. Valith read the directives twice. Then she closed the message window. What did they say? Uthan asked. They said to stop talking and run. Uthan looked at the being on the screen. It was still standing there, still waiting, still unarmed, still alone, still pressing a palm against glass toward a civilization that had just been told warships were coming. And Uthan said. Valith opened the linguistic bridge. She looked at the human on the screen and spoke clearly, each word chosen with the precision of someone who understood that honesty was the only currency that held value in this transaction. Our government has been notified. They are sending ships. Military ships. They are afraid of you. She paused, watching the translation register on the being's face. I am required to tell you this honestly because you have been honest with me. You showed your fleet. You showed your capabilities. I am showing you our response. There will be warships here in 40 hours. The being listened, then it spoke. We understand. We expected this. It is normal. Every species we have found has been afraid first. Fear is reasonable. We are very large and very strange, and we arrived without warning. Your government is protecting its people. We respect this. What will you do when our warships arrive? Nothing. We will wait. We will not arm. We will not move. We will be exactly where we are now, doing exactly what we are doing now, talking. If your warships wish to scan US, THEY may. If they wish to circle US, THEY may. If they wish to aim their weapons, THEY may. We will not respond to threat with threat. And if they fire, we will not fire back. The statement landed in the monitoring bay like a physical weight. 15 Sarathi absorbed it in their own private silences. A fleet of 47 vessels, the largest 90 kilometers long, technology millennia, beyond anything the conquered possessed, and this being was saying they would absorb fire rather than return it. Why? Valith asked. Because we did not cross the galaxy to fight. We crossed it to find someone to talk to. If we respond to fear with force, we prove that fear was justified. And then we are alone again. We have been alone for a very long time. We would rather die than go back to that. She parsed the statement through every xenolinguistic model she knew. The idea that a species would build the capacity for violence and then define its identity by the refusal to use it, that was not a military doctrine. That was a philosophy, a creed. Your weapons are a moral argument, Valith said. The human's expression shifted, not surprise, something closer to recognition. The face of someone who has carried a principle alone for a long time and has just heard someone else articulate it. Yes, exactly. Strength that is never used is the only proof of peaceful intent. Anyone can be peaceful when they are weak. Peace from a position of overwhelming strength, that is a choice. We want the galaxy to see that we choose it. The remaining hours until the flotilla's arrival passed in a state that Valith could only describe as structured vertigo. She continued building the language bridge with the human who she now knew, identified herself as Commander Inez Tavaros of the Terran expeditionary vessel Meridian's Deep. And with every exchange, the translation became sharper, the grammar more fluid, the concepts more nuanced. Tavaros told her about the Terran expeditionary program in fragments that Valith assembled like a shattered mosaic. They had left their home system 11,000 years ago, not as a military force, not as conquerors, as a question. Could a species survive by reaching outward instead of collapsing inward? They had built their fleet over centuries, each vessel a generation ship redesigned for permanence, each hull carrying not just crew but culture libraries, genetic archives, agricultural biomes, schools. The 90-kilometer flagship was not a warship. It was a city, a museum, a seed vault, A civilization that had decided to become mobile because the alternative was stagnation and eventual extinction. 11,000 years, Valeth repeated. The number resisted comprehension. The Sarathi conquered the oldest functioning interstellar alliance in mapped space, was 4,000 years old. These humans had been traveling before the first Sarathi astronomer had looked up and wondered if there were others. 11,214, by our reckoning. The exact number is important to us. We keep count. Every year marked, every generation recorded. It is how we remember what we are doing and why we left. Why did you leave? Tavaros's face shifted in a way that Valeth was learning to read the particular arrangement of muscles around the human's eyes that accompanied memory. Not pleasant memory, the kind that sits in the bone. Our world was dying, not quickly, slowly. The way a fire dies when no one adds fuel. We had wars, we had famines, we had centuries of looking inward and finding nothing worth looking at. We were running out of reasons to continue. So someone proposed the alternative. What if we looked outward? What if the reason to continue was not inside us but somewhere else, waiting for us to arrive? And you found it. Not yet, but we have not stopped looking. Valeth absorbed this. A species that had converted existential despair into a drive system. A civilization that had launched itself into the void not because it had answers, but because it believed the questions were worth the journey. They had found others. Tavaros would not say how many or where or what had happened in every case, but she described patterns. First contact was always the same. Announce from a distance, transmit identity, build language, wait. Some species had responded, some had not. Some had responded with weapons. At hour 14, Tavaros told Valeth about the Kethune. The Kethune had been the third species the Terran fleet encountered, 7,000 years into their journey. A crystalline species that communicated through harmonic resonance. The Terrans had spent 40 days building a shared language, following the same protocol they had used with Valeth: mathematics, geometry, vocabulary, grammar, one concept at a time. On day 41, the Kethune had opened fire. Their weapons were light-based coherent beams that cut through the forward scout vessel's hull in 3 places, killing 92 crew members in the initial strike. The Terran fleet had not returned fire. Not one vessel. The scout had vented atmosphere, lost power to 2 decks, and drifted for 6 hours while the Kethune continued firing. Valeth's hands were still on the console, but she was not working. 92 people. 92. We know all of their names. They are engraved on the forward bulkhead of the Meridian's deep, where every crew member passes them every day. And you did not fire back. We repaired. We WITHDRW to a safe distance. We waited. How long? 300 years. The KETHUNE who fired on us are long dead. Their great GRANDCHILDREN sent a signal 2 centuries later, a mathematical sequence, the same one we had used, FIBONACCI. They were asking us to come back. Did you? Yes, and they apologized. Not for the attack, they understood the attack, the same way we understood your government's order to send warships. They apologized for the fear. They said, we were not ready. Now we are, and we talked. And the talking was worth the 300 years and the 92 names on the bulkhead. Valeth sat with that for a long time. The monitoring bay around her had gone very quiet. Everyone had heard. The Sarathi had good ears. How many names are on that bulkhead? She asked. Tavaros was silent for a moment. Then, 2,041. 2,041 people killed across 11,000 years of knocking on doors, and the fleet had not fired a single shot in response. Not once. The dead were not a cost of war. They were the price of a principle. How? Valeth asked. How do you absorb weapons fire from civilizations that fear you and never strike back? We mourn, we repair, and we wait, sometimes 4 generations. Sometimes the children of the ONES who fired come looking for us. Sometimes they don't, but we never close the door. You have lost people. To species that attacked you. Yes. And you still do this. It is who we are. If we fire back, we become something else. Something that crossed the galaxy for the wrong reasons. Valith recorded every word. She recorded the gravitational data, the visual feed, the acoustic analysis of Tavaros's voice stress patterns. She recorded her own heart rate, which the station's medical monitoring system showed had been elevated for 11 consecutive hours. She recorded Uthan sitting in his chair with his eyes closed and his lips moving in what might have been the first prayer a Sarathi station commander had offered in centuries. She recorded Doron's hands, which had stopped trembling at hour 6 and had not trembled since, as though the fear had been replaced by something that had no name yet. The conquered flotilla arrived at hour 39. 12 warships, the pride of 3-member species, armed with the most advanced weapons the conquered had developed across 4,000 years of collaborative engineering. The largest was the Sarathi dreadnought Unwavering Vigil, 2 kilometers of weapons platform and shield generator, crewed by 6,000 Sarathi who had been trained their entire careers for a battle that was never supposed to happen. The human fleet remained exactly where it had been, engines dark, weapons cold. 47 vessels motionless, while the conquered flotilla spread into an attack formation around them like insects circling a sleeping mountain. Valith watched the tactical display from the monitoring bay. The Unwavering Vigil, the most powerful warship the Sarathi had ever built, could have fit inside the forward hangar bay of the human flagship. The entire conquered flotilla, combined, displaced less mass than the smallest human escort vessel. Fleet Commander Torvan's voice came over the military channel, hard and clipped with the authority of a career officer who had never questioned a directive. Deepwatch Station, this is Conquered Flotilla 7. We are assuming tactical authority over this sector. All communications with the unknown vessels are to cease immediately. Xenolinguist Saruman, you are ordered to stand down. Valith opened a channel to the Fleet Commander. Fleet Commander Torvan, I respectfully decline. I have established a productive diplomatic communication with the contact delegation over the past 39 hours. They are aware of your arrival. They have stated explicitly that they will not arm, will not maneuver, and will not respond to any aggressive action with force. You decline, Torvan's voice was ice. On whose authority? On the authority of the Contact Protocol, Section 9, which states that in a confirmed first contact event, the senior xenolinguist on-site retains communication authority until a conquered diplomatic delegation arrives and formally assumes the role. You are a military commander, not a diplomat. Until a diplomatic team is on station, this is my contact. The silence on the military channel lasted 11 seconds. The diplomatic team is 26 hours behind us, Torvan said. I am not going to sit in an attack formation around an unknown fleet of this scale for 26 hours while you chat. Then do not sit in an attack formation. They are not attacking, they have not threatened, they have not moved. Lower your posture and wait. And if they arm, they will not. You cannot know that. I have spent 39 hours speaking with them, Fleet Commander. I know it the way you know your own crew's intentions, by what they have done, consistently under pressure, when they had every opportunity to choose differently. They did not cross 11,000 years of space to start a fight in the last mile. Torvan did not lower his posture, not immediately. The conquered warships held formation, weapons hot, targeting solutions locked on the nearest human vessels. The tactical display showed threat indicators covering the human fleet like a fever. The humans did not react. Not one ship adjusted its position. Not one sensor sweep changed frequency. Not one weapons port opened. Not one shield activated. 47 vessels, each one capable of ending the conquered flotilla without measurable effort, sat in space like stones in a river and let the water flow around them. For 2 hours the standoff held. Valith monitored both sides from the Deepwatch station, the Concorde's tactical chatter on one feed, the human fleet's gravitational silence on another. The contrast was staggering. The Concorde channel was dense with traffic, damage projections, threat assessments, targeting priorities, contingency protocols, officers requesting confirmation of rules of engagement, analysts debating whether the human fleet's weapons-cold posture was a tactical deception, fear expressed as procedure. An entire military apparatus trying to process the presence of something that rendered its doctrine meaningless. The human fleet produced nothing. No chatter, no emissions, no active scans. Valith's passive sensors showed their drive cores at minimum station-keeping output, their hull temperatures consistent with powered-down systems. They were, in every measurable sense, doing nothing. Then the unwavering Vigil's executive officer, a Concorde officer named Prelek from the Dithani species, made a mistake. He ordered a targeting lock test on the nearest human escort vessel, a 2-kilometer ship that the Concorde had designated Contact 7. The lock was standard procedure, a sensor sweep that painted the target with focused energy to calibrate fire control solutions. Harmless in isolation. But the sensor sweep carried enough directed energy that the human vessel's hull registered it as a weapons-grade contact. Valith saw it happen on her display before anyone else. The targeting lock engaged. Contact 7's hull temperature spiked by a fraction of a degree as the focused energy washed over it. And for 1 second that Valith would revisit in her memory for the rest of her life, the human escort vessel's sensor profile changed. It did not arm. It did not raise shields. What it did was worse. It became visible. For 1 second, the vessel's full electromagnetic profile blazed on every sensor in the sector, and the readings that cascaded across Valith's console painted a picture that made the Concorde's threat assessments look like children's drawings. The 2-kilometer escort vessel was carrying more weapons than the entire Concorde flotilla combined. Energy arrays that registered in frequencies the Sarathi had no names for. Shield generators capable of output levels that exceeded the brown dwarf's total luminosity. And drive systems, 4 redundant drive systems on a single escort vessel, any one of which could have accelerated the ship to velocities that would make it a kinetic weapon of civilization-ending scale. The readings lasted 1 second. Then the vessel went dark again, quiet, cold. The hull temperature settled back to baseline. The electromagnetic profile returned to the passive background hum of a powered-down ship. 1 second, just long enough for every sensor officer in the Concorde flotilla to see what they were pointing their weapons at. The Concorde tactical channel went silent, not disciplined silence, stunned silence. Valith heard someone, she thought it was Prelek, say a single word in Dithani that her translation system rendered as mercy. 3 hours after the flotilla's arrival, something changed. The unwavering Vigil sensor officer reported that the human flagship, the 90-kilometer vessel at the center of the formation, was transmitting, not to the Deepwatch station, to the Concorde warships directly. "It is transmitting on our military frequencies," the sensor officer reported, audibly shaken. "It has our encryption protocols. It decoded our military encryption in real time. The signal is addressed to Fleet Commander Torvan by name." Torvan's response was immediate. "All ships weapons-free, prepare to." "Wait," Valith's voice cut across the channel with an authority that surprised even her. "Read the transmission first. Read it before you fire." The transmission was short. It was in perfect Sarathi, flawlessly grammatically correct, rendered in the formal diplomatic register used for communications between Concorde heads of state. It said, Fleet Commander Torvan. We decoded your communications not to threaten but to speak to you directly and clearly so that nothing is lost in relay. We understand your fear. We understand your duty. We have encountered both before in other systems, with other species who pointed their weapons at us and waited for us to flinch. We did not flinch then. We will not flinch now. We wish to offer you the same courtesy we offered your xenolinguist, complete transparency. Our weapon systems are visible on your scans. They are powered down. They will remain so. We invite you to verify this continuously for as long as you require. We are not your enemy. We do not wish to become your enemy. We wish only to talk. The door is open. We will not close it, even if you fire. Commander INES TAVAROS, Terran Expeditionary Vessel Meridians Deep. The military channel was silent. Valith could see the tactical display. Conquered weapons locked. Targeting solutions active, 12 warships aimed at a fleet that sat motionless and unarmed, and had just demonstrated the ability to crack their most secure encryption as casually as reading a posted notice. Torvan spoke again. Not to Valith, to his tactical officer. Confirm weapons status on the unknown vessels, all of them now. The response took 90 seconds. The tactical officer's voice, when it came, had the quality of a man reporting something he did not entirely believe. Fleet Commander, weapon systems on all 47 vessels read as powered down. Confirmed. Shields are inactive. Drive cores are at minimal output, station keeping only. Their fighter bays are sealed. Their point defense arrays are cold. Sir, these vessels are not at any level of combat readiness. They are parked. Another silence. This one stretched long enough that Valith could hear the unwavering vigil's life support hum through the open channel. Parked, Torvan repeated. Sir, that flagship alone masses more than everything in our formation combined, by a factor I cannot accurately express without more data, and it is sitting there with its weapons off. If I may speak freely, sir, this is either the most elaborate trap in military history or these people genuinely do not want to fight. Then, one by one, the targeting indicators on Valith's tactical display went dark. The unwavering vigil lowered its weapons first, then the escorts, then the flanking cruisers. The formation held, but the teeth retracted. Torvan's voice came over the channel, and the ice had melted from it. What remained was not warmth. It was the raw, stripped sound of a military officer confronting the limits of his doctrine. Xenolinguist Saruman, continue your contact. We will hold position and observe. Valith closed her eyes. Both hearts were hammering, but the rhythm was different now. Not the rhythm of fear. Something she did not have a word for in Sarathi, the lexicon of 4,000 years of careful observation had not needed one, because this had never happened before. The closest she could find was a compound she invented on the spot, Vaneshan, standing at the edge of knowledge and feeling the edge welcome you. She opened the channel to Commander Tavaros. The human's face appeared on the screen, and Valith saw the same expression she had seen 39 hours ago. Careful, controlled, afraid, and choosing with full awareness not to let the fear decide. Commander Tavaros, our military has stood down. I know. We felt the targeting LOCKS release. Thank you. Do not thank me, thank the protocol. I do not think it was the protocol, xenolinguist SORAMUN. I think it was you. Valith allowed herself a fraction of what the Sarathi called a voon, the smallest possible smile, used between individuals who had shared something that could not be undone and would not be forgotten. Commander, my government will send a diplomatic team. They will arrive in 23 hours. They will be cautious and they will be formal and they will ask you many questions and they will not trust easily, because trust has never been tested at this scale before. But they will come. We will be here. We have nowhere else to be. The human paused. When she spoke again, The voice underneath the translation carried a texture Valeth had not heard before, rough, low, weighted with something older than language. For the first time in 11,000 years, we have arrived. Arrived where? The human looked at Valeth through the screen. Across 7 kilometers of vacuum and 4,000 years of silence, and the entire breadth of evolutionary biology and every rational argument for fear, the human looked at the Sarathi xenolinguist and said, "Home." The word needed no translation. But it needed context. Valeth leaned forward. "You said you left your world because it was dying. You said you crossed the galaxy looking for someone to talk to. You have been traveling for 11,000 years. And you call this," she gestured at the dead moon, the dim brown dwarf, the listening post that most of the conquered considered a bureaucratic footnote, "home." Tavaros's answer came slowly, each word measured, and Valeth sensed that the human was choosing her language with the same precision that Valeth herself used when drafting formal submissions to the conquered linguistic authority. Home is not a place. Home is the end of looking. Home is when someone answers and means it. We have been talking to you for 42 hours, and in that time, you have told us the truth about your government's response. You have apologized for an automated radar pulse. You have stood in a window and pressed your hand against glass, not because a protocol told you to, but because you wanted to. The human's voice cracked, just slightly, a fracture in the composure that Valeth would not have caught 12 hours ago, before she had learned to read this species' expressions like a second language. That is home, someone who wants to. Valeth sat with the weight of that. Around her, the monitoring bay was quiet. Uthan stood at the viewport, his reflection faint in the composite, looking out toward the dark where 47 vessels held position, and a 90-kilometer flagship waited with the patience of something that had been patient for longer than the Sarathi had been a civilization. Doron spoke. His voice was very soft. "Valeth, the fleet's gravimetric output has changed, fractionally. The frequency shift is consistent across all 47 vessels simultaneously." "What does it mean?" He checked his instruments, checked them again. "It is the harmonic pattern, the one from hour 7, the one you could not translate at first. The shape of loneliness ending. 47 vessels, broadcasting the same gravitational harmonic in unison. The fleet was not just waiting. It was expressing something, the collective emotional state of a civilization that had traveled for 11 millennia and had finally, found someone who pressed a hand against the glass. Valeth pressed her palm against the console, felt the station's vibration beneath her skin, the hum of instruments and air recyclers, and the heartbeat of a place that had spent 4,000 years listening to nothing, and had finally heard something worth the wait. She understood that the universe had just become larger and smaller at the same time. Larger because there were humans in it now, a species that had crossed the dark for 11,000 years on the improbable, irrational, magnificent chance that someone would answer. Smaller because the distance between two beings who chose to trust each other was always shorter than the distance between stars. She opened the contact archive's permanent record. She designated the event with the timestamp and coordinates and signal parameters, and the names and ranks and vessel designations of every participant. She recorded Commander Inez Tavaros, Terran Expeditionary Vessel Meridians Deep. She recorded Station Commander Uthan. She recorded Doron and every technician who had been in the monitoring bay when the floor first trembled. She recorded Fleet Commander Torvan, who had lowered his weapons. She recorded herself, xenolinguist Valeth Saruman, Sarathi Deepwatch Observatory, the first person in 4,000 years of listening to hear something listen back. And in the field labeled Outcome, where 4,000 years of blank templates had waited for a single entry, Valeth Saruman typed 2 words. "Contact established."